Welcome to Between Over and Next with your hosts, Holli and Robert, a happily married couple who explore the space between what was, what is, and what's to come. From career changes to navigating life's uncertainties, this dynamic duo will empower you to live your happiest life at every age and stage. So, get ready because your journey with Holli and Robert starts now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Between Over and Next. Hi, Holli.
Hi, Robert. When we learn about something, I love sharing it with others.
Yes, anyone who's ever met you knows that.
And when we learned about the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, it was so exciting because we really do take our personalities wherever we go, at home, at work, at life, and as we say in Between Over Next, all the in-between moments as well.
I was exposed to personalities during my college career as a psychology major. In your 20s, it doesn't nearly make the impact that it did when we revisited the whole idea of personality types. And for me, was certainly an aha moment. Things became much clearer.
I love getting experts that really know their stuff. And today's featured guest, Michael Segovia, is an expert. He has been with the Myers-Briggs Company for 35 years. He is a principal consultant. He has been frequently quoted in publications such as Inc., Fast Company, The Wall Street Journal. He received his master's degree from Trinity University in clinical psychology, specializing in assessment and interpretation. What I thought was really cool about Michael is his TED Talk. And even though it was 10 years ago, Robert, I loved watching it. I'm going to include it in the show notes.
During our pre-interview, he had mentioned, even though it was 10 years ago, felt like just recently that he did that.
It is about celebrating differences, appreciating differences, and he's going to tell you a little bit about the founders of the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. I just looked this up. Isabel Briggs Myers was born in 1897, and she was responsible for the creation of what has become the most widely used and highly respected personality inventory of all time. The Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, also known as MBTI, instrument, now taken by at least 2 million people each year and translated into 16 languages, was developed over a period of more than 40 years, progressing from Isabel Myers' dining room to a cottage industry.
This is going to be eye-opening for a lot of people.
I want to quote Isabel Briggs Myers. She said, "When people differ, a knowledge of type lessens friction and eases strain. In addition, it reveals the value of differences. No one has to be good at everything."
Very
So with
true.
that said, meet Michael Segovia. Hi, Michael. We're so happy you are here with us today.
Thank you, Holly. Hi, Robert, as well.
So nice to see you.
I just celebrated my 36th anniversary at the Myers-Briggs Company. I joined when I was 25 years old. I was out of graduate school. I moved to California, and it just sort of worked for me that I ended up at this company that really valued who I am in terms of my differences, where I was encouraged to be who I am early on, and I realized, wow, I think I found my home. And all these years later, I look back and wow, I'm still here.
That's amazing. That's not typical
It's
these
true.
days. I really attribute that to really finding your professional home. I commend you and I commend the company because to retain people at your caliber for so long is truly a testament.
One way I really realized I was at the right place, I was presenting at a conference, and our president walked up to me afterwards and said, "Who was that?" And I remember initially I was a little offended, and I said, "Well, I was trying to present, I was trying to look really smart and know what I was talking about." And he said, "Michael, that's fine. However, your natural self is who we really want. And he said, don't take this wrong, but you're kind of a little bit dorky, and a little bit dorky is actually good because it's you, it's natural, it's real. Be that person. It sort of gave me that permission to be my authentic self. And if I get to do that every day, I can't wait to be back at a company that lets me do that.
What a blessing. So,
Yeah.
how old is the Myers-Briggs Company?
We were founded in 1956 by a professor at Stanford University who had a colleague at UC Berkeley, and they were talking about publishing an assessment. The colleague at UC Berkeley couldn't find a publisher, so the person at Stanford decided, I'll start a publishing company, and he did, with the warehouse in his own garage. And we began there, moved to an office near Stanford, and then near Google, and now we are basically a company around the world. We have our main headquarters in Sunnyvale. However, we are now located throughout Asia and Europe.
I am fascinated by the MBTI.
The Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, developed after Katharine Cook Briggs and Isabel Briggs Myers. They are the authors of the assessment based on the theories that we get from Carl Jung.
Tell us a little bit about the backgrounds of that.
Sure. So the assessment itself looks at, simply put, an elevator speech, if you will, some information around how do you take in information and how do you make decisions. That's basically it. Where when we look at the first preference pair, which is extroversion versus introversion, and people who prefer extroversion get energized by the outer world of action and people and things. People who prefer introversion get energized by the inner world of ideas and that opportunity to reflect. Then we look at how do you take in information, and we do that two ways, using sensing, which is about taking in information in a very step-by-step sequential way, or intuition, which is about taking in information in a more big picture, pattern-wise way. Once we take in information, we then make decisions, and we do that two ways, thinking or feeling. People who prefer thinking take in information using objective logic, focusing on the task at hand, versus people who prefer feeling make decisions based on how those decisions will impact people, how those decisions relate to their values. So again, thinking and feeling is about how we make decisions. And then finally, judging and perceiving is about how do we organize our external world, where people who prefer judging organize their external world based on schedule, plans. They like to check things off. They often say if they have a list of things and they complete something on that list, even if it's not on the list, they add it and give it a check mark. There's this real sense of satisfaction for closure for people who prefer judging versus people who prefer perceiving. They like to keep their options open. So if you force them into making a decision too soon, you're going to find some pushback because they want to make sure they keep their options open so they have enough information so that eventually they can make a decision. Now, these preference pairs, we all use both. We all use E and I, S and N, T and F, and J and P. Just typically we prefer one over the other.
Thank you so much for that overview.
That crossover is important to understand because we're not always one way, right?
Exactly.
It is like the way we lean. That's why we have to kind of learn all of the personality types because we do live all of those personality types at one point or another during the course of every day.
Exactly, Robert. And we need to use all of them to be effective and productive people in work and life. Now, first and foremost, we want to honor our preferences. Mine happen to be INFP. However, to be productive, I need to use extroversion. I need to use sensing, thinking, and judging, not equally well, just as it's appropriate. And we actually call that good type development, where as we move through our lives, we want to learn how to effectively use both sides of a preference pair, while, of course, first and foremost, honoring who we are, honoring that authentic self.
I love everything about this. Before we move on to some of the questions, so this way everybody can understand more about themselves and their experiences with others regarding their Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, I want you to tell everybody that there are a lot of these kind of things out there when you do a Google search. So can you explain the difference between the Myers-Briggs Type
Sure.
Indicator and all the others that are out there?
Correct. Yeah, thank you for that, Holly. I work with the Myers-Briggs Company, and we are the publisher of the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator assessment. There are other tools out there, However, the main difference is the real Myers-Briggs type indicator is based on extensive research that looks at a good amount of reliability, a good amount of validity. I'm going to show you. Here's the manual. This is the newest manual published at the end of 2018. And I will say a lot of people who talk about the MBTI don't even know that there is a manual and haven't really even taken the real MBTI. So if anybody is interested, they can go to www.mbtionline.com, and that would give you access to the real assessment where you go through actually a process. First, take the assessment, then you learn what do we mean by the word preferences. Then you learn about each preference pair, E and I, S and N, T and F, J and P, and you do your own self-estimate, your hypothesis about what you think your type might be. Once you do that, and only once you've done that, will you then get a report of some kind. So we're following the guidelines of how you would deliver this assessment virtually. I do this work one-on-one and with groups of people as well, where I also follow that process by you take the assessment and you're always just invited to take it, never required. Once you take it, then you learn again about preferences. You then go through that self-estimate and then you get your reported type. That reported type is just one part of the process. It's another hypothesis because in the end, you, Holli, you, Robert, get to decide based on my self-estimate and my reported type, now what do I think my preferences might be? It's a process. And that's why it's called an indicator, not the Myers-Briggs type test. It's the Myers-Briggs type indicator. It's an indication of what your preferences might be.
We'll have a link in the
Yes.
show notes with a
Good.
special promo code
Correct.
where you can achieve a bit of a discount. But more importantly, it's the understanding of the results, right? Taking that is one thing. It's the type of assessment that you need to be completely open and honest. There
bet.
is no right answer or wrong answer. And being as truthful in how you answer this will give you the most accurate picture, correct?
Not like being graded, right?
Exactly, Holly. Yeah, exactly, Robert,
Yeah.
as well. And that can be difficult for some people based on the environments that they're in, the families they are a part of, the careers, the environment in terms of work that they are a part of. So I always say we want you to answer these questions in what we call your shoes off self. And by that, I mean, try to remove any roles and expectations from work. Try to remove any roles and expectations from home and just answer how you prefer as if you have nothing and no one to answer to. Basically, what I'm saying is take off all the hats you wear at work, all the hats you wear at home and any other place. And that's your mindset that we're looking at, knowing full well it's impossible to remove all of those roles and expectations. However, the more you can do that, the more reliable and the more valid your results will be. It's a process.
This is all such fabulous information, and we didn't even get into the nuts and bolts of what we want to explore. I really feel this is for all audiences. There's no barriers to age. Like when you
Correct.
take it, I think the sooner you take it, the better, right? But talk a little bit about that.
Sure. There is a 14 grade reading level for the MBTI. Some people might say 14 and up. In my opinion, a little bit older. However, there is also a children's version. It's called the Murphy-Myers Type Indicator for Children. And I just cannot imagine how valuable something like this would have been when I was growing up in a family that loved me without a doubt. However, I think always looked at me as a little bit odd. I'm Mexican American, and I was part of a family that very much expected extroversion energy to be part of our existence. And it really isn't who I am. I know for me on a Saturday night, my favorite thing to do was to stay home and watch The Love Boat and then Fantasy Island. And that was a great Saturday night. But my mother would always say, but Michael, why don't you go out and do things with your friends? And I'd rather just stay home. It was more comfortable for me. And so I grew up feeling a little odd, a little like I don't belong. And those sort of experiences can affect things like self-esteem, self-worth, and even the development of my preferences moving forward.
Why do you think it's not introduced earlier? This seems to me to be the perfect senior year of high school type of thing to do as you embark on college, and you're going to have a roommate who's probably not exactly like you. And now you're suddenly living and understanding why they do certain things and you do certain things. I mean, this would be enlightening
Wouldn't
at
it be?
that stage of life.
And there are a number of schools, a number of universities who do use the Myers-Briggs early on as part of that. You're now in this new environment. Let's help you explore you. Let's help you also explore how this might benefit you in your college major cert by also maybe bringing in a vocational assessment like the strong interest inventory. Very much. However, I think everybody should be invited. Of course, nobody should ever be required.
So ultimately, we want to strengthen relationships, all the ships of our lives,
Sure.
partnerships, friendships, courtships. We were talking before we even came on about how home impacts work and work impacts home. So, how do the MBTI personality types influence the dynamics of personal relationships?
I think it goes back to understanding that we all bring something to every situation we're in, including personal relationships. And we also have an opportunity to learn and grow in every relationship that we're in. So when we're in a relationship and we maybe overuse our personality type or we use our type as an excuse, that can negatively impact a relationship. When we are open to learning about differences and the people that we're in a relationship, there's where the power comes. I think of my own partner and I, we both have similar preferences in terms of introversion and feeling. However, we're both very different when it comes to how we take in information. He prefers sensing, I prefer intuition, and we're very different in terms of how do we organize our outer world. He prefers judging, and I prefer perceiving. And of course, I have permission to share this information. And it's something I want to be clear. Anytime we do share a type, it should always be by permission. So going back to the idea of sensing and intuition, I travel quite a bit. And so every night when I'm traveling at 9 o'clock on the dot, we talk. There's that sensing, judging approach to schedule and being specific. So he will start explaining his day by saying, well, I got up and I had my coffee. And then I did. And then I did. He's given me the details of his day in order. And I've learned early on that I need to be very focused on hearing that detail, not jumping around and looking at the squirrel over there or anything else, because it can be really annoying to him when I do that. And I've learned also when we talk and he asks me about my day, not to give him the general intuitive example of, oh, the day was fine. He wants to know more about my details, about what happened, what I did first, what I did next, and so on. So understanding that difference has been really important for us. And it's also been really helpful for me to learn to focus more because the younger version of myself, overusing my intuition preference was often about, wow, there's an idea or there's another idea. And a better approach might be, why don't I focus on what you're giving me right here in the present moment? I think one way I've matured, not completely, however, my relationship has definitely helped me do that.
It's also your awareness of
Bet.
it. And with your permission, I am ESFJ and Robert is INTP. And we have a long, strong, successful marriage for 32 years.
Really too.
And we are business
All in a
partners.
row.
All in a row. And we are also business partners. We live an entrepreneurial lifestyle based on your expertise. What are key factors that contribute to our harmonious relationship despite our exact opposite personality types?
Exact opposite. ESFJ, INTP. I think a big part of a success with any relationship, and maybe even especially exact opposite preferences, is around maturity. And when I talk about maturity, I think about type development. Type development goes back to honoring who you are and then learning how to appreciate the opposite side. Easier said than done. I think it might also relate to, and you can tell me if this is correct or not, how we understand in our relationships what are our rights and what are our responsibilities. So, rights, for example, Holly, your right as somebody who prefers extroversion is to be able to talk things out with Robert and get those ideas out because people who prefer extroversion will often say, I don't know what I'm thinking until I hear myself say it. And getting that right to do that. Now, your responsibility, Holly, is not to overwhelm Robert with all of that information. And Robert, you're right, going back to introversion, is to get that reflection time, that time to think through your ideas instead of being asked in the moment to give everything that's on your mind. Now, your responsibility, though, is to not keep it inside. However, to also share what's going on so that both of you get what you need in your relationship. And we can look at each preference pair and explore rights and responsibilities. My guess is you say you're in a great relationship. A lot of it has to do with you understand those rights and responsibilities.
You're absolutely right. And I think what has improved over time
Mhm.
is our ability to respond to those differences and to have enough confidence in the relationship to say, "Hey, wait, enough. I can't,
Yeah.
you got to ease up. I'm done. I can't, without it being offensive, but knowing that we do have boundaries within those personality types, but that only comes through knowing each other so well and being able to sense when it's necessary to go along with what's not necessarily comfortable or the way I would handle it, because I know that's what Holly needs. I know that when listening is important and when I can feel comfortable saying, I've got it.
But as the interrupter and speak out loud person is I do believe that we've become more accepting of one another in the past few years since we've taken the MBTI.
Oh, the shades were pulled and the sunlight came in. It was like, okay, now I
Now
get it.
I know. Yeah.
And even
Yeah.
though I'm a psychology major and we went through all of this, it's readiness. We understand that as sexagenarians now in our 60s, that
I'm
there
with
are
you.
certain things that get unlocked as we age that
Yeah.
couldn't be unlocked in our 30s. We get it, that wisdom blossoms, right? So, how does personality type change over time, or does it?
What you're getting me to think about is Jung's model of lifelong development, which is this theory that looks at when we're born with these inborn predispositions or preferences. And in that first half of life, if we are encouraged to use those preferences, then they grow in terms of comfort in using them. If we're not encouraged, then those preferences do not or may not develop. Now, what should happen though is we are encouraged to be who we are in that first half of life. We then hit this place of midlife where we have all these questions coming at us. Questions like, is this the relationship that I'm supposed to be in? Is this the career I'm supposed to be in? And those questions are so scary for some people that instead of moving through to this place of individuation or development, they move back because who they were in that first half of life fits them like a glove. So who they were in that first half of life could be my preferences for INFP. And then I decide then I'm only going to use those preferences. I'm not going to flex to the other side. What should happen though is we move through that place of midlife. We take what we've learned and then we learn and start to even get fascinated with the opposite side. So to your question, while our preferences don't necessarily change, how we use them can and should change. How we express them can and should change. So I shared my preferences are INFP, focusing on the middle two letters, intuition and feeling. People who prefer NF are about possibilities for people. We like people to like us, which is common for people who prefer feeling in general. We might, for people who prefer NF, have difficulty using sensing and thinking, being very specific and being direct in terms of making our decisions. I've learned, though, I'm now 62, to be a bit more direct, to be a bit more specific. Now, have my preferences changed? No, I'm just growing and developing and learning how to use that opposite side.
Your background is psychology as well, right, Michael?
Correct. I have a master's in clinical psychology, which did not introduce the Myers-Briggs because in my training, it was more around intelligence tests where there's a right and a wrong. It was around projective assessments like the Rorschach and the TAT. Again, a right and a wrong. The Myers-Briggs type indicator is not a right or wrong. That's one thing I love about it. All of us bring something to every situation. However, we also all have stretched areas that we can work on.
So let's talk about some of the common challenges that arise when people with different MBTI types are working together. How can those challenges be turned into opportunities for growth and collaboration?
Yeah, I love that. I tell this story quite a bit. Yeah, years ago, I was a brand manager at the Myers-Briggs Company. A couple of years into that, another person joined the company who was also a brand manager. So we had different products, same role, different products, same role. And I remember when we first started meeting, I was really struggling with our time together. By the way, her preferences were ISFJ, mine are INFP. So when we would meet, she liked one-on-one meetings. However, she needed a 2-hour meeting. It seemed like every day, going over all of these details, all of these specifics. And I'll tell you, after the third meeting, I thought my head was going to explode because it's just too many details
Too
for
much.
me. Robert, you can probably relate.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
And so
feeling
I
it.
remember after that third or fourth meeting, 10 minutes into it, I said, this has been great. I'm going to head back to my office. See you later. And I practically ran out of her office. About 10 minutes later, she called me and said, that was really rude. And I thought, yeah, it was rude. However, it's just too much detail. I'm really struggling with it. So we decided to share our MBTI types because early on I didn't know hers. I shared mine. And then what we started to do was negotiate those differences. So instead of a meeting every day for 2 hours, we did maybe every third day for about an hour. So I was able to get my point across in a big picture way. She was able to get her points across in a more step by step way. And as a result, we became two people who weren't just twice as productive. We were 10, 20 times productive. And we became the people at the company that relied on each other. She became my best friend at the company. So from two people who couldn't stand each other to two people who really just relied on each other. I would even use the word loved each other. That's really how the relationship evolved. And it was the MBTI that did that for us.
So, in essence, there were so many things that could improve communication, productivity, team dynamics, and then it expands beyond anyone else that you're working with.
It expands because now we're able to bring what we do together throughout the entire company. I remember she would come to me with a project she was working on and say, Michael, I have all the details. However, I need and she meant this in a nice way, I need the fluff to tell me what it all means. For her, the fluff meant, what's the big picture message? And I would look at it and say, oh, so here's what coming to me using my intuition preference. And I would go to her with my project and I would say, I know what it means. I just need the detail to prove it. And she would get on her computer, look things up and go, all right, here's the data that you need. And that just more than doubled our productivity, the quality of our work and so on. I will always remember that experience as an opportunity to seek out people who are different from me instead of avoid people who are different from me.
So, do people with the same MBTI personality type generally get
Mm.
along better? Or can those differences actually contribute to a stronger, more balanced relationship?
Yeah, I like that. There are a number of factors around how we get along or not. There is some data, though, that shows people of the same type might get things done faster because they're taking that same approach. Their challenge might be not considering the other side. So I tend to work a lot with people who prefer NF. As I shared earlier, my preferences are NF. If I stay with people who prefer NF and don't bring in the sensing thinking approach, I'm going to likely leave out some details and maybe using my feeling preference, concerned about how my decisions impact people, that might sidetrack me from making that tough, logical, task focused decision. So, sure, you can find people of the same type kind of, oh, yeah, I thought that too. However, if we're all thinking the same, we're maybe not thinking enough because we need the other side.
Do you feel like there's a difference between the entrepreneurship and the employee mindset?
There is some data that shows us that people who prefer thinking and judging tend to be most attracted to leadership, and leaders are often entrepreneurs. So it doesn't mean that people who prefer thinking and judging are the best leaders. What it means is people who prefer thinking and judging often promote people who look like them, who act like them. They create these mini me's. And it's why I do a lot of work in this area. I like to encourage more diversity in thought around leadership instead of let's keep it the same, let's keep it how it's always been.
And let's talk a little bit about how we can use MBTI insights to handle change and conflict.
Yeah, change and conflict. One thing to remember when it comes to change is based on our preferences, we handle change differently. So if you focus on change with me and talk about ROI and you talk about we've done it in the past, it's likely not the best motivator for me because I tend to value how things relate to my inner core of values that I live by, that drive me. And if you can address change in terms of how it's going to make this difference in people's lives, that's where I then become the champion. Now, if I approach somebody like Robert with that approach, it might not be the best way, because for Robert, he likely will want to know, what are the things that need to get fixed by this change? And oh, here's how it will get fixed. And then you're going to find Robert maybe more on board with that. When it comes to conflict, I will say conflict is often the result of stress. And when we start to get stressed, we may tend to overuse our preferences. So you've given me permission to share your types. You've already shared them, I believe, as well. For Holly, your preferences are ESFJ. People who prefer ESFJ, the heartbeat of that type, the driving force of that type, is something called feeling used in the extroverted world. It's about making decisions, considering how those decisions impact people. When people of your type start to get stressed, you might overdo that, where it might even look like overbearing care, which could then stress or lead to conflict with Robert or other people who deal with things in a different way. On Robert's side, the heartbeat of INTP is something called thinking in the introverted world. And so that's about making decisions, focusing on the pros and cons of a decision. When people who prefer INTP start to get stressed, the pros might disappear, and all you might get are the cons, where they might start to come across as hypercritical, where everybody's wrong, which could then lead to conflict with you or other people who have a different approach to that. So I always go with what's happening in terms of that person's stress and trying to catch it early to help them through that stress. One thing I always try to remember, do I always live by this? No. However, in a place of conflict is try to understand as opposed to be understood. It's a passage from the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. So when I'm getting in that place of this person is really getting to me, seek to understand as opposed to be understood. And that can sort of help as well. And when we understand it, what is that person's preferences and what's happening in terms of how those preferences might not be helping them in that moment.
You know, we've been talking professionally here, right, in the workplace, but we've exposed our kid to this.
Mhm.
We like to expose them to
Yeah.
what we find important. So we as parents always felt that we needed to enhance our children's education with real world experience. And many times we took them out of school to work on projects that we were doing in
Great.
our business, because we knew that spending the day with us working was far more valuable than what they might be doing in school that day, or equally as important. And we've done that on a number of occasions. And those are the types of things that actually stick with them. You talked about an indicator available for younger children. Talk about the family dynamic and personality types and how the parent-child relationship can be strengthened and improved based on what parents know about their children's personalities. And as children grow and learn to better understand their parents, which I think is totally overlooked when bringing children up, is to understand, and I try and share with our kids as much as possible about how important respecting your older parents are and how things change. But what about that family dynamic and this whole
But
MBTI?
wait, and that's also loaded, Robert, because I feel we're sandwiched in between our adult children who are 27 and 30 and our parents who are in their early 80s. So there's a lot of family dynamics here, and we definitely want harmony. So now with that little tidbit added to it, Michael, share away.
That's a big topic to explore. And there are a lot of people who work with families to help them understand, all right, because you do this way, doesn't mean you're trying to get under the skin of somebody else to annoy them. So many dynamics, of course, to explore. Type can help with that. I'm not a parent. However, I am a son, and I know what it's like to be a son and to be parented. And if we can understand as a child with parents, trying to understand where they're coming from and help them understand where we're coming from, that can be really powerful. And one opportunity would be, let's all invite everybody in the family to take the MBTI and let's talk about our results. Let's explore them together with the mindset of one is not better than the other. I think of years ago, I worked with someone, this was in the Philippines. Her preferences were ENTP. And she shared with me driving around Manila one day, her daughter, 5 years old in the back seat, said to her mom, "Mom, why don't we ever do anything you say we're going to do?" So here's what was going on. The mother with preferences for ENTP, focusing specifically on intuition and perceiving, would say to her daughter in the back seat, "Tomorrow we're going to go get ice cream, and then we're going to go get you a new dress, and then we're going to go." She was giving all these ideas, all these possibilities. The daughter in the back seat, we don't know her type, perhaps sensing, perhaps judging, was likely, all right, putting that in her file cabinet of, oh, so tomorrow we're going to do this, and the next day we're going to do that. And when it didn't happen, what the daughter heard from her mother was, you don't complete anything you say we're going to do. So there's an example of what we say to our children, how they hear it could be very different than how we think we're delivering it. So if we understand type, we can then be a lot more clear in our delivery, where instead of treating people how we want to be treated, which is really the golden rule, think about treating people how they want to be treated, which is more of the platinum rule. And that can really impact in a very positive way any relationship, including, of course, our families.
Right. Because we're all capable of that. We're all
Yeah.
capable of giving other people what they need to get, because with the understanding is a quid pro quo, right? We can't always be taking. We have to be giving. There's balance in the universe, I believe. There's so much here to really unpack, and so many layers. It really evolves over time, right? Relationships, as you grow, change, and how you handle them should grow and change as well, because needs change over time. This truly is fascinating.
It's why I think it's important throughout the growth of a relationship to keep asking, to keep talking about what are our rights and what are our responsibilities? What are our rights? What are our responsibilities? And not give up on allowing yourself the right to be your authentic self while also flexing when it's appropriate. There's the responsibility side.
Understanding and embracing personality types is vital. And this is a great opportunity for people to invest the time and money to learn more about themselves, because there's no question they're going to show up in a more happier, fulfilled way.
Isabel Briggs Myers talked about the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator as a tool to help people make clear perceptions and sounder judgments. And those clear perceptions are about learning how to use not just S, not just N, both. And clear judgments, which is about not just making decisions using thinking or just feeling. It's about using both while honoring who we are. However, learning how to do both, that's good development. That's becoming that healthy person as we develop and grow in our life.
We're grateful that you are continuing her legacy by coming on to Between Over and Next. Is there any wisdom, advice, lessons you want to share with our listeners?
One thing to think about, and hopefully it's a message I've tried to get across, is honor who you are, find your authentic self. It's there. And then see how you can continue to grow beyond that. But first and foremost, honor who you are, and don't let anybody tell you that who you are is wrong, that you should be something else. Just be who you are and then develop from there.
I think the only thing that would be wrong is for you to be someone who you're not.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. There's this craze right now to get genetic testing and find out who your ancestors were and where you came from. And while I think that's incredibly important, to not have a true indication of who you are, your personality, and what makes you up is vitally important, if not more important, to living your day-to-day life than genetics or genetics alone. I think people should really consider having this tool as part of their life and knowing what it's about. It certainly changed things for us.
Oh, definitely. And I think it's the best decision you can make is to go to mbtionline.com and get your assessment. And there is no question that you are going to elevate your life, but all of those around you, personally and professionally.
It's truly enlightening. It really is truly enlightening.
And I hope people, when they take the assessment, they consider it as part of a lifelong journey, that you go through the experience of hypothesizing first your preferences, and then you get your results and you put it all together. That's the beginning of the process. It's then what do you do with that information moving forward, talking to people in your life who are important to you, sharing who you are comfortable this information with, and then how you can improve your relationships, personal or professional, moving forward. It's a lifelong event, not just that one experience.
I couldn't agree more. And I think now that we're in graduation season, this would be a fantastic graduation present for
Love
someone
it.
to give and to receive. It's a perfect
High school
opportunity.
or college
school or
or
college.
master's, because there's a lot of wonderful moments ahead, and they can
You bet.
only be stronger and better.
I believe so. I
Love
believe so.
that. Great.
So, Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. And I can certainly see revisiting this down the line with you.
Let's do it. I'd love to.
That was such an enlightening conversation with Michael today, wasn't it, Robert?
It was. It's a tool that will give you a distinct advantage in life, in business, in your relationships, in observing others' relationships.
The Myers-Briggs Type Indicator provides valuable insights into our behaviors, our preferences, and really how we interact with others.
A lot of people get exposed to this tool in their corporate space. But
If you're lucky.
But I think it has become critical for people who are entrepreneurs, especially who wear many hats in a company, right? Because they're doing everything. More than anyone, I think, needs to understand personality types. That helps you work in a team environment. It gives you insight into yourself as well. Because not only do you need to understand others and their personalities, but if you don't have a firm understanding of your own personality type, how could you possibly operate? You need to first know who you are before you can identify who someone else is.
Every Sunday and every Wednesday, we release new blog articles that are always related to the episode that we release every Tuesday. So I encourage you all to go to hollyandrobert.com, go to the blog page. You're going to see a treasure trove of articles. This week's there is one on understanding and appreciating each other's differences. And importantly, it focuses on the power of acceptance. When we understand our type, we can identify our strengths and areas for development. And also when we understand the types of those around us, we can communicate more effectively, resolve conflicts more easily, and build stronger, more empathetic connections.
I think that we're going to get a lot of really great feedback from our listeners and viewers about this particular episode. Because anyone who we've come in contact with or we've discussed this, it's really been eye-opening for them. I don't expect anything different from those of you who are listening to this podcast.
Importantly, it'll help us to be more patient, more understanding, and more supportive of one another. We really hope that today's episode with Michael has inspired you to explore your own personality type, and those are the people in your life. We've done this with our kid. We did it with Lindsay and Elliot as a newly married couple. We want to understand more about our family dynamic. We've done it with friends to understand more about them. And really, for those of you who want to dive deeper into understanding your Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, your MBTI type, we have a special offer for you.
Yeah, so we've arranged with the Myers-Briggs Company to offer a discount to our listeners to take this evaluation and find out your personality type. We're offering a 10% discount on the MBTI online for individuals, and you enter at checkout the promo code Holli and Robert, HOLLIANDROBERT, Holli and Robert. And through December 31st of 2024, you'll achieve a 10% discount on the MBT individual evaluation. So I encourage you to do that.
The link is in the show notes. And as Robert said, during our talk with Michael, it is a fabulous gift idea. So treat yourself to learning more about yourself. And importantly, gift those that you care about and that you love this code to explore their personality type. So thank you to Michael Segovia for
absolutely.
joining us today and sharing his expertise. And thank you, our wonderful listeners and viewers, for tuning in to another episode of Between Over and Next. Please take advantage of that promo code and start your journey towards better understanding yourself and others.
We hope that you enjoyed listening and will delve further into your own exploration of your personality types and for those around you. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to Between Over and Next. We hope you enjoyed this episode and found it meaningful and insightful.
If you value it to be worthwhile, please share it with your friends and family.
We would really appreciate it if you could take a moment to write a review for us. Your feedback will help us continue to create content that resonates with you.
And don't forget, in the show notes, you can find all the relevant links mentioned in this episode, from accessing free downloads to visiting our website and more.
If you have any questions or comments, we would love to hear from you. Simply send us an email. Our email address is hello@hollyandrobert.com. We're always excited to connect with our listeners.
So until next time, thank you again for joining us on Between Over and Next.
Thank you for listening to Between Over and Next, the podcast that navigates the twists and turns of life with courage, laughter, and a whole lot of inspiration. Tune in every Tuesday to hang out with Holli and Robert on your favorite podcast platform. Visit hollyandrobert.com and follow them on social media to ignite your passion and fuel your dreams.